to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here in the 6 o'clock hour. The fun begins. We've got a lot to cover, as a matter of fact. We're going to be talking about Trump's hush money trial. We'll be talking about Iran and Israel. We have quite a few things here, even on the local front. The budget, strange happenings with the New York State budget. Hochul essentially announced there's a final budget that no one's actually agreed to. I think I'm wording that right. But first, I saw this study, this research this morning, and I analyzed it for a little bit. There is a poll that finds the most stressful time of the day is 8:15 a.m. And even though this is out of Britain, that people feel often overwhelmed after getting out of bed. 51% at 8:15. I thought that makes total sense because that's when it hits you that, yes, Frankly Speaking is off the air for the day, and now the real world has to begin. That could be my only assumption here. The morning rush inside the house might be more frustrating than the one that awaits many of us on the way to work. That's according to a new survey. The most stressful time of day is 8:15 a.m. And because they're helpful at studyfinds.org, there's 5 ways to make your morning routine less stressful. Well, I would suggest wake up at 6, tune into Frankly Speaking, relax a couple hours, and then get ready to work. But they have other suggestions. Prepare the night before. Lay out clothes, pack school bags, prepare lunches, and set up breakfast items the night before. Also, consider showering or bathing in the evening. This reduces the number of tasks in the morning and prevents last-minute scrambles. Number 2, establish and stick to a routine. Create a consistent morning routine that suits your family's need. Use a schedule or checklist that includes times for waking up, eating breakfast, getting dressed, and leaving the house. 3, get up before the kids. If possible, wake up at least 30 minutes before your children. Use this time to get yourself ready and have a moment of peace before the day begins. This can help you feel more in control and less rushed when it's time to wake the kids. Then delegate responsibilities. Assign age-appropriate tasks to your children, such as making their beds, dressing themselves, or putting dishes in the sink. This not only teaches responsibility, but also lightens the load. And finally, limit technology in the morning. Okay, I would say 6, turn on Frankly Speaking and start your day off right. And thank you, by the way, for joining us. We do have a guest coming up. I believe we had this scheduled a while ago, and I forgot to verify, but I believe we'll be talking with Andrea Turini from San Giobanni, Valdarno, Italy. He is coming to town to perform tonight at the Pasta Dinner and Piano Concert. So if you have any questions for our guests, you can send those to me, the number at the bottom of your screen. And just so you have the information, there is the info on tonight's fundraiser. It's for our friends at San Giovanni Valdarno Sister City Committee. It's tonight at Corning High School. Dinner 4:30 till 6:30. Now you can eat in or take out if you want to stick around for the concert. A little bit. It's what does it say there? $20, and it's 7 o'clock. The concert begins, so that'll be a nice event. Something I know many of you are looking forward to. All right, Governor Hochul announces a New York State budget deal. Sort of. New York Governor Hochul. New York Governor Kathy Hochul made an announcement Monday afternoon that was 2 weeks overdue. She and legislative leaders were said to have a handshake deal on a $237 billion state budget agreement. Sort of. In the Capitol's ornate Red Room, Hochul, a Democrat, picked her words very carefully as she announced that she and the leaders of the state Senate and Assembly, quote, have the parameters of a conceptual agreement. The parameters of a conceptual agreement. I don't understand why you make this announcement. I really don't, unless it's to maybe put on some kind of pressure campaign. Now, the budget, as you are well aware, because we bring it up almost every morning, was due April 1st. It was all part of Hochul's latest turn at what has become a traditional in the sometimes upside down world in Albany. Governors announcing a deal before the actual deal, signaling the end is near, but not quite there, in the annual state budget process. We've proved that we can come together for the good of our state, and we did, Hochul said at the press conference. Now, this is important. Neither of Hochul's main negotiating partners, Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins and Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie, were in attendance for the governor's announcement. Just prior to the announcement, the Senate and Assembly Democrat majorities both signaled they were nearing an agreement with the governor, but still had more negotiating to do. We are close, but there is no agreement, Senate Democrat spokesperson Mike Murphy said after Governor Hochul's announcement. The negotiations are moving in the right direction, but there are still many issues to discuss with our members. Now, this is not new, as it is mentioned. This has kind of become a weird tradition, if you will. We're going to take a look at what, I don't even know if you can say the holdup, but just some of the things that they are working on here. What are they, 16 days overdue? The budget is 16 days late. Now, well, would they be fine with, oh, I'm sorry I didn't pay my New York State taxes 16 days late? I'm sure I'm fine, though. But we'll take a look at what is being said. A really interesting story I'm going to jump around a little bit this morning, as you can tell. I don't have any information for you on this, but it is something to keep in the back of your mind. Clarence Thomas was mysteriously absent from Monday's Supreme Court session. It has raised alarms after he was absent from court on Monday with no explanation. The eldest and longest-serving Supreme Court justice's absence was announced by Chief Justice John Roberts, who said his colleague would still be able to participate in the day's cases using briefs and transcripts of the arguments presented before the High Court. Thomas did not participate remotely in arguments, however, as justices sometimes do when they are ill or otherwise unable to attend court in person. Now, they heard two cases. One's a federal anti-bribery statute and one's a Fourth Amendment case. But Thomas's mysterious absence comes 2 years after the President George H.W. Bush appointee was hospitalized with an infection during which he still took part in cases. The conservative jurist has served since October 23, 1991, and is considered a stalwart member of the court's 6-3 conservative majority. Just something to keep in the back of your mind. Now, I'm not bringing it up for any specific reason. It was kind of breaking news, and we have a lot of breaking news on the program this morning, like Israel and Iran, and what, again, we talked about this yesterday. But, of course, we, in the United States, President Biden instantly says, we're not going to get involved. We want things to cool down. Isn't it interesting how they blame Israel? They'll say, we want things to cool down. We don't want escalation. And they look at Israel. Israel, the one that was attacked by Hamas, the one that was attacked by Iran. And yet the media and the White House and others point the finger at Israel. It's very frustrating. And, of course, if you didn't hear, there's anti-Israel protests going on numerous places, but one shut down a bridge in New York City. We'll talk about that as well. I don't want to give too many highlights and then not have anything to talk about. We do have a local issue. We've got an update on Sheriff Allard's scenario, and just as a highlight, Sheriff Allard, to fill us in and do a better job explaining than I could, he's going to join us on tomorrow's broadcast. So make sure you tune in for that. 7:20, Sheriff Jim Allard will be our guest. Now, when we come back from break, we are going to talk a little bit more about the budget, the New York State budget. I don't want to focus too much on it because, as I said, it was announced that they're kind of somewhat sort of close. We can talk about it if you'd like, but as of right now, I'll just go through some of the I'm not going to say, again, not sticking points, just some of the negotiations, what is being said, what is being done. Because Governor Hochul, when she announced that conceptual agreement, she had the budget highlights of what is being discussed. So we will talk about that when we come back. But we've got to take our first break. You guys are quiet this morning. We're not getting any virtual waves. Feel free to comment at any point in the program. You see that number on the bottom of your screen. Weigh in on the issues of the day. What do you think? Well, maybe you don't know yet about the governor's budget. We'll talk about it when we come back. If you have any questions for our guest from San Giobanni, Valdarno, Italy, please feel free to write that number as well. Just text. Or you can leave a voicemail, whatever's easiest for you. So let's take our first break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Our beautiful view of Market Street as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street. So Governor Hochul announced a conceptual agreement on the budget. So it isn't really finalized, but for whatever reason, Governor Hochul decided they're going to make the announcement, which has become a weird tradition in Albany. She said, "I promise to fight the right fights for New Yorkers, deliver common sense solutions, and tackle the thorny issues that others might ignore." And that's exactly what we've done. We're delivering on a common sense agenda, fighting crime, fixing our mental health system, and building more housing so people can afford to live in New York. It is interesting, this idea of fighting crime, because what she does, and it's smart politics, she'll suggest that she's tough on crime. She'll suggest she hates bail reform or these type of things. Nothing really gets done. But she saw what Lee Zeldin, the traction that he gained because of being tough on crime and talking about public safety, that she has to push and spin her record. As a matter of fact, we're going to hear from, not physically hear from Lee Zeldin, but he has an opinion piece out today about crime, which will tie in after this. But what some of the highlights are for this budget: securing a historic agreement to address New York's housing crisis. I think that would come as no surprise. Creating a statewide tax incentive for multifamily housing. This has been a major topic. It was kind of gummed up the works the last time too. Cracking down on retail theft by increasing penalties for offenders who assault retail workers. $40.2 million for retail theft enforcement, and a $3,000 tax credit for business owners to invest in security resources. Now, we learned that there was an issue that Hasty, who does not believe that stricter penalties deter crime, him and others in kind of extreme Albany were fighting increased penalties for offenders who assault retail workers, which is just horrible to take that stance. I don't know how you could take that stance. You think about a poor retail worker just trying to make a living, and they're getting randomly attacked, and you don't want to punish the attacker to try to deter this. But I'll continue. Shutting down illicit cannabis storefronts by authorizing the Office of Cannabis Management to padlock businesses for a full year, allowing local governments to pass laws to execute padlock orders, establishing fines for landlords knowingly renting to retailers selling cannabis without a license. I don't know. Will that work? I don't know why you just don't let local law enforcement take over. But continuing, fighting the rising tide of hate by expanding the number of offenses that can be prosecuted as hate crimes, and investing $35 million in the Securing Communities Against Hate grant that protects houses of worship, religious schools, and other at-risk sites. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the conceptual agreement on the budget. No, there has not been an agreement that has been met for the budget, but Governor Hochul announced that they were really close, even though others have signaled they're not very close. Improving public safety. See, she's going to try to hit on as much as she can so she can have press conferences trying to convince you that she's tough on crime. Improving public safety through targeted investments in communities, including $347 million to continue New York's effort to reduce and prevent gun violence, and $35.7 million to prevent and prosecute crimes of domestic violence. Investing $7.1 million. Yes, I know, a lot of money being thrown around here. Well, that's what happens when it was, the deal that she proposed, $237 billion state budget. But investing $7.1 million to reduce recidivism and improve reentry into the workforce by providing more extensive supervision of individuals on parole, expanding traditional housing opportunities, expanding college programming to all state prisons, and improving transportation for visitors to and from state correctional facilities. So again, if you're just joining us, this is about the budget. This is directly from the governor's office. Making our streets safer with new efforts to fight toll evasion on our roads and fare evasion on our subways. I don't know how that makes our streets safer, but making record investments in mental health, including $19 million for mental health services for school-aged children, $55 million to establish 200 new inpatient psychiatric beds as state-run facilities, and mandating better mental health care at hospitals. Investing $31 million to expand mental health services for first responders and for individuals struggling with mental illness who are involved in the criminal justice system. Maintaining our $3.9 billion commitment to support distressed hospitals and $20 billion multi-year investment to build new healthcare infrastructure. I know this is all wonky. That's the problem with the budget. I'm just giving you some of the highlights as the governor sees them. Securing $200 million in Medicaid savings through fiscal intermediaries and by cracking down on CDPAP fraud. Investing $7.5 billion in the healthcare system over the next 3 years. Wow. Supporting New York students through record funding for P through 12 schools, investing a record $35.9 billion in total school aid, including $24.9 billion in foundation aid, lowering the inflation factor in the foundation aid formula to right-size funding for the 24-25 school year, and commissioning a Rockefeller Institute study to examine the foundation aid formula to prepare for changes next year, ensuring every school district utilizes instructional best practices grounded in the science of reading to improve reading proficiency. Oh, good. Maybe I could use a class among New York kids. Advancing a consumer protection and affordability agenda. Okay. You know, you look at the cost of all this. We're throwing around millions and billions as if it were nothing. Making record environmental investments with $500 million for clean water, $400 million for the Environmental Protection Fund, and $47 million to support the governor's goal to plant 25 million trees by 2033. So with a conceptual agreement in place, the legislative houses are expected to pass bills that will enact these priorities based on priorities. Think of that. I know Assemblyman Palmisano, when he's on the program, we talk about priorities. And you look at the money that's being thrown around. No mention here about what they're going to do about prison closures. Remember, she's stuck on 90 days to let employees, corrections officers know. But she said, with a conceptual agreement in place, the legislative houses are expected to pass bills that will enact these priorities based on a preliminary assessment of the negotiated changes to the executive proposal. The total budget for fiscal year 2025 is currently estimated at $237 billion. The fiscal year 2025 budget does not raise income or statewide business taxes and maintains state reserves at the gold standard of 15%. For a rainy day. So that's directly from the governor's office. Now, again, the budget negotiations are a little stagnant right now. She makes the announcement. I don't know if it's the light of fire because you see deadline extension after deadline extension. We're 16 days late on the New York State budget. And I know what the governor says and those in Albany. It's not about getting the budget on some deadline. It's not trying to rush it. It's about getting the right budget. Well, you tell me what you heard there that sounds like it's the right budget. The situation remains fluid, is what Politico reports, and any agreement could blow up at any time. So again, a little bit about Bronx Democrat Senator Gustavo Riviera said, "It ain't over till the fat lady sings. I know that I'm not a lady. I might be a little chunky, and I haven't sung yet. So it's not done until it's done." Okay, Senator Riviera. I mentioned the marijuana issue. A tentative plan combines the proposals Hochul and Assembly member Jennifer Rajamar to shut down illicit cannabis shops. The plan would empower the state's Office of Cannabis Management to shut down illegal shops, but would also enable municipalities to opt in and utilize local authorities to close them. I like the wording of that better than how she had it in her press release, so I don't know how that will end up looking like, what that will end up looking like at the end of the day. But getting local law enforcement involved, it seems like a no-brainer. I know they talk about the Office of Cannabis Management being understaffed. Well, put it in the hands of people that know the area, that know where these shops are set up. A current proposal includes more money for state police to combat retail theft and a tax break for businesses to enhance security, as I mentioned. The proposal also includes increased penalties for assaulting retail workers, which, remember, again, that was kind of a holdup for a while, so we don't know what those penalties will actually look like. The state is also expected to expand the number of violent crimes that could be charged as hate crimes, as I mentioned. All right, is there anything else? Nope, nothing else. I guess worth mentioning. So there is your quick overview to start off your Tuesday morning here on Frankly Speaking with New York State budget talks. We are going to talk about Israel preparing to hit Iran. We've got a few things here in general about Trump's hush money trial. I've got an interesting piece. Maybe we'll get to that here in just a little bit. Coming from Congressman Nick Langworthy. We do have a local issue, an update from the sheriff's office. The Steuben County Sheriff Jim Allard. I will give you a rundown of what he said yesterday, but I will also be talking with him tomorrow. So if you have any questions for Sheriff Allard, or if you have any questions for our guest today, who will be performing at the San Giobanni Valdarno Sister City fundraiser, get those to me at any time. You see the number on the bottom of your screen, 607-358-3131. We're just getting started. Thank you for joining us here on Frankly Speaking. We will be right back. Thank you so much for joining us here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Hakem. We are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. We were talking about the New York State budget. Feel free if you want to weigh in. I mean, pretty standard. No real surprises from what we've been hearing. That's not to say we like it. 200 and whatever I told you, $237 billion. My goodness. Well, spend it like you got it, I guess. $237 billion New York State budget. Nothing has been agreed upon. Just as a reminder, Governor Hochul announced that a conceptual agreement. Not really sure what that's all about. But there you are. That's where we're at this morning. As soon as a budget deal is reached, we will be reaching out as well to something like Phil Palmisano, Chris Friend, as well as Senator Tom O'Mara, just to get an update on what they're seeing with a budget. That'll be after it is officially passed, because we've been talking about it quite extensively. Hey, just something really weird. I know I've been jumping all around this morning. We talked about Clarence Thomas not showing up for arguments, which is troubling. We talked about 8:15 being the most stressful time of everybody's day. How about this? Remember George Santos and how he was going to make a comeback? He had enough of Nick LaLota, and he was going to challenge him. Santos' threatened comeback bid hasn't raised a single dime. A new campaign committee from disgraced former Representative George Santos raised no money and reported no activity in March, calling into question his plans to return to Congress. Hey, I like this. How's this? Good morning, Frank. Good morning. This is a comment from a viewer. I realize this isn't a newsworthy comment, but you made a comment about the lack of virtual waves you had this morning. But in fact, aren't any comments you received during your broadcast really virtual waves without the actual emoji? And just for that, I think you're exactly right. So we're up to 3. I never thought of it that way. And I think that is newsworthy. Thank you. Yes, it doesn't have to be the emoji. Just having the conversation is really what it's all about. So I appreciate that. It's a very good comment. So Santos, I'm not going to focus anymore on Santos. Just to give you an update. Santos announced last month that he planned to mount a primary challenge to Representative Nick LaLota. He did not qualify for June's GOP primary, though. He theoretically could still run as an independent. LaLota, who represents a district further up Long Island than the one Santos held before he was expelled, was among the Republicans who led the charge to expel Santos from Congress after he was indicted on nearly 24 charges and a House ethics panel found substantial evidence of criminal wrongdoing. I know there's still a lot of people out there that are upset that they expelled Santos, and I don't think too many people are Santos defenders, don't get me wrong. But obviously he had not been found guilty of anything at that point. It really led to bigger issues for Republicans down the line. And also there's the argument to be made that he was voted in, and that should have really been up to the voters, not to his co-workers, so to speak. Those are the arguments I've heard. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But again, I don't want to focus too much on Santos. But in a report filed with the Federal Election Commission on Monday, Santos' new campaign committee reported no fundraising and no spending, suggesting he had not yet mounted an actual campaign operation. Who would donate, I wonder? Because wasn't there issues of campaign funds being misused as well? So who's going to be throwing good money after bad? Well, unless we're talking about the New York State budget, I suppose. Okay. Oh, another interesting point. Now, let's get to it. Let's talk about Israel. because I don't want to rush this, as we are already a half an hour into the program, which is amazing. If you are just joining us, we're going to hear what Sheriff Allard said yesterday about that ongoing court case. Then we will have him on the program tomorrow. A little bit later on in today's show, we're going to be talking to the pianist that will be playing tonight at the San Giobanni Valdarno Sister City fundraiser here in Corning. And there's all the information you need to know. It's today at Corning High School. Dinner 4:30 till 6:30 with the concert at 7. I know a lot of people are looking forward to it. I just wanted to highlight it. So Israel is preparing its Air Force to hit Iran clearly and forcefully. That's the language that's being used, quote, clearly and forcefully in response to missile barrages. Did you see how they are spinning? So remember, Biden keeps saying don't. That's his big takeaway word. If I'm saying to Iran, if they're thinking about attack Israel, don't. And then they do. So now the spin is, we're going to get to this in just a moment. The spin is, well, did they really attack? I mean, 99% were shot down. I'd say they didn't. The way they spin it and twist it, the red line that keeps being erased. But Israel has decided to hit Iran clearly and forcefully and is already preparing its warplanes to carry out the strike. The reported decision comes after 2 war cabinet meetings in which leaders of the Jewish nation debated how to respond to Saturday's barrage of 350 suicide drones and missiles. According to the report, the strike will be intended as a message that Israel, quote, will not allow an attack of the magnitude against it to pass without a reaction. Yes, the president in the White House is saying, do not retaliate. We don't want things escalating. Well, what message does that send to Israel's enemies? Nothing's going to be done if we attack you. Now, some are wondering if it was almost a distraction too. Look over here. Never mind what we're doing behind the scenes, meaning Iran. But yeah, this always, hey, we don't want you to escalate, Israel. Well, Israel is the one sitting there minding its own business, and it gets attacked on October 7th. And then what happens after the fight against Hamas, as it continues, of course, fingers being pointed at Israel as the problem, as if Hamas didn't attack them during a ceasefire. And then you have Iran hit them, and it's the same thing. Well, Israel, don't escalate this. However, Israeli leaders also hope the response will not spark a wider war. President Biden and allies have urged Israel to exercise restraint, with Biden reportedly telling Benjamin Netanyahu that the U.S. would not back a counterattack. At a White House press briefing on Monday, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby called Iran's missile attack against Israel, quote, a spectacular and embarrassing failure, and said the key U.S. ally is in a far stronger strategic position today than before the attack. Kirby deferred questions about whether he expected the U.S. to be briefed ahead of the military response, saying that is an Israeli decision to make. Whether and how they'll respond to what Iran did on Saturday, we're going to leave squarely with them. Israeli Defense Minister warned his U.S. counterpart, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, that the Jewish home state had no choice but to retaliate against the rogue Islamic Republic after it launched hundreds of missiles and suicide drones into Israeli airspace on Saturday, as you are aware. Iran's aerial assault was in retaliation for an Israeli airstrike in Damascus on April 1st, in which a top Iranian general was killed. The debate over how and when to strike back at Iran prompted Israel to delay a long-anticipated military incursion into the South Gaza city of Rafah. So the White House on Iran striking, even though the U.S. said don't. Another way of looking at this is they didn't. Says, you know what, Ken? You're exactly right. Good morning, Ken. A wave is a friendly passing acknowledgement. Isn't a text more of a personal handshake? I would agree. I just don't have a personal handshake emoji. So we're going to keep it as is for now. But I agree. I like everybody's idea. The comments are really what it's all about. So thank you. Oh, here's an interesting point. If Iran gave a heads up about what they were going to attack, doesn't that show that all that has happened in the world, it's all just political theater, just meaning the elites know and just profit? You're saying give a heads up to the United States? No, I mean, We are an ally. I'm not sure. I wouldn't if I was Israel, only because you don't know how quickly it would be leaked. But back to what I was saying about John Kirby. Sorry, got on a tangent there. On CBS on Monday, the host asked, let's talk about deterrence. Because after decades of war via proxies between Iran and Israel, we now have the first direct attack by Iran on Israel. And it follows the U.S. saying to Iran, don't. Well, they did. So what is the state of U.S. influence in the region this morning? I think that's a fair question. I don't understand, because even if you look at what Biden said, he said, I would tell them don't. And then later on saying that I expect Iran to attack sooner rather than later. So why go out there and do the whole tough talk, dirty, hairy, don't attitude if you believe it's ultimately going to be a failure? But I think that is a good point. And it's Tony DeCouple saying, we said don't. Well, they did. So what is the state of U.S. influence in the region this morning? We'll hear what John Kirby had to say when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. So as I mentioned, on CBS yesterday morning, co-host Tony DeCouple asked John Kirby, saying, Iran, we told them don't, and they did. So what is the state of U.S. influence on the region this morning? Kirby responded, I think another way of looking at this is they didn't. Before I get into his reasoning on that, isn't this just like when we talk about inflation or in New York State public safety, where, never mind, it's not as bad as you think it is. I know you've got to get groceries and things like that, but never mind. It's really actually, the economy is really good. In this case, another way to look at it is Iran didn't strike after being told by the United States not to. I think another way to look at this is they didn't. They meant to cause casualties. They meant to cause extensive damage inside Israel, and they didn't. And the reason they didn't was because the United States and partners came to help defend Israel. We came to their assistance. And we knocked down just about everything that the Iranians threw up into that sky. And as the president told Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the phone Saturday night, this was an extraordinary success, and you ought to look at it as an extraordinary success. Israel proved that it's not alone, and they proved that they're militarily superior to Iran. And they ought to consider what that success actually means in the region. There's no reason for this to escalate further. The president doesn't want a wider war in the region. Everything he's been doing since October 7th has been designed to prevent that. And of course, we're not looking for a war with Iran. So there's the message to, I guess, Israel, don't, right? Now, no one wants a wider war, don't get me wrong. But Israel's not the one further escalating this. Iran did the attacking. And to think that that is how they're going to spin it, as if that attack didn't happen because the defense was successful, you can't make up political, I hate the term word salad that everybody uses, because it's not really a word salad, but the political speak, right? Imagine that. I think another way to look at this is they didn't. They meant to cause casualties. They meant to cause extensive damage inside Israel, and they didn't. So you're telling me then that they heeded Biden's warning, that they didn't send how many rockets and drones into the sky? Just because it was successful doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Nope. Got some comments here. We'll try to get to some comments after our next break. Thank you. Keep those coming in, though. Wow. Now everybody's getting talkative in the 6 o'clock hour. I was a little worried there for a while. Just kidding. Thank you, everybody. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. We do have some local issues. How am I doing on time? I'm running just a little bit late. Just trying to get all my ducks in a row here. I've mentioned this before. I shouldn't keep making the disclaimer. But Hugh Hewitt, I'm not the biggest fan of him. But he has an interesting piece this morning on Fox News that said Biden's red line is erased. Yes, that, again, I don't see the upside in saying don't, when you admitted later that they were. What happens if Israel does nothing after Iran's attack on Saturday? President Biden told Iran, don't. Iran did. Team Biden then quickly turned to restraining Israel from responding. Take the win, the president is reported to have counseled Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It is a good thing that Israel, with the help of the U.S., the U.K., France, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, fended off the worst results. But Iran escalated way beyond what it has ever dared to do. Biden urged Israel to stand down. Astonishing. Yeah, but Biden, that is the new talking points. Because look how many people were at that anti-Israel protest yesterday. Biden is, first and foremost, concerned about votes at the end of the day. We're going to tell you more about what Hugh Hewitt had to say here in just a little bit, but we've got to take another short break. Stay with us. This is, Frankly Speaking, here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are back. Sorry, got a little extra view of Marcus Street there. Getting some things figured out in the background here. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking. Comment. If you're just joining us, we talked about the New York State budget. Can't call it an agreement because it's not agreed upon yet, but that's kind of what the governor's calling it. We talked about that this morning. And this coming from a viewer with regards to budget issues. And I know we don't have any control over what is in the budget. But doesn't it seem unfair to law-abiding citizens that they have to incur student loans for their education? And yet, if you are a convicted criminal, your education is free. That's a fair point. I realize a penal system is required to rehabilitate these citizens. But how many of them come out of the system and go to become model citizens? Also, the budget is making provisions to improve transportation for families of those imprisoned for their conjugal visits. I'd like to improve my vehicles more often than we do now, but we have to personally budget for those changes, not receive them for free. All very fair points. And isn't it interesting sometimes what they consider to fall under public safety as well? You know, as the governor tries to talk tough on public safety. Okay, back to Hugh Hewitt's piece. Biden's red line is erased. At this writing, Israel has not responded to Iran. I hope by the time this column posts that Israel will have done so. The Wall Street Journal was reported that Israel is very close to unleashing a response. As a matter of fact, if you hear at any point during the program, please let me know. Comment as you normally would. I've been trying to check the various websites I do for show prep just to make sure we haven't missed anything. We have also learned that 9 missiles from Iran did manage to evade interception and strike the IAF's air base in southern Israel, along with another nearby IAF base, and that 120 ballistic missiles were launched during the Iran attack, as well as 200 plus cruise missiles and drones. That's not a symbolic attack. It is a mostly failed massive attack. It wasn't intended to be a show. It was a strategic attack on the Jewish state Iran wanted to kill and destroy. And that is the point. They're trying to spin this, not just how John Kirby said, is, well, really, they kind of didn't because it was so successful. It's also, I think, very important to note that this wasn't some symbolic attack, as some in the media have tried to portray it, or it was just for show. No, it was to destroy, kill and destroy. So Biden's didn't work again. One poster on X quipped that every time he says don't, they do. Commentaries Seth Mandel pointed out a memorable commentary podcast that Biden has made the foreign policy fiasco measure of former President Obama's red line erasure. John Podhoretz noted in the same podcast that Biden hasn't said anything at all after Saturday night's bombardment. His policy towards Iran is shredded. There is no policy towards Iran anymore. And we know they've tried to appease Iran over and over again. Both are right, as are Abe Greenwald and others who are also on this podcast. There is a bet amongst them now on whether Israel both responds to Iran and enters Rafah to finish off Hamas. That's a great point. I think they will. The United Kingdom's Prime Minister and Foreign Minister David Cameron have joined the Neville Chamberlain Club anchored at the White House. If Israel acts, it will do despite their allies in the defense of the Jewish state, asking them not to go on offense. But as former Israeli ambassador Michael Oren bluntly stated, defense is not deterrence. He's right, too. The willingness to take a punch or many punches doesn't deter the enemy. It encourages the enemy to try another assault. This isn't the sort of thing one has to learn. You got the same lesson from Ralphie in A Christmas Story when he finally snaps. Bullies have to be stopped. They don't evolve into your friends, not on a playground, not in the realm of national security. And that's what, going back to Obama, but as well as this administration, has always thought that was the tact with Iran. Appeasing, giving them money, trying to buy friendship, if you will. What does Hamas think at this point? Is he going to continue to reject Israel's ceasefire offers because he's a religious fanatic? Or because he expects to emerge from the tunnels as the terrorist equivalent of Churchill at the close of the worst part of the Battle of Britain, because the U.S. forces Israel to stay out of Rafah and thus not destroy those tunnels? I don't want to go into any more of this. You get the idea. But the erasing of the red line. It's up to Israel now to reset the understandings Iran has developed, as well as the mullah's reliance on President Biden, to always take and advise the wrong course on national security. Hopefully, by the time you read this, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the War Cabinet have done just that. So that's Hugh Hewitt. Just wanted to pass that along to you real quick. As I mentioned, hundreds of anti-Israel protesters wreaked havoc in downtown New York City yesterday. This is a common theme. It'll be interesting if things are still happening in Israel by the time of the Democratic National Convention, what that will look like in Chicago. We know there's protests at Biden's fancy $25 million fundraiser with Obama and Clinton. There's even protesters there. In this case, hundreds of anti-Israel protesters wreaked havoc in downtown New York City. Here's something I've mentioned on the program before. Let's say you are very strong in your opinion on some subject, whatever the subject that is, and you want to protest. Don't you want to win people over to your side? Because I wouldn't think you'd want to, I don't know, let's say disrupt their trip home from work after a long day, to shut down bridges and shut down roads. How many people are you winning over like that? That's just a pure strategic question. I don't understand it. It's like spoiled children. Hundreds of anti-Israel protesters wreaked havoc in Lower Manhattan on Monday, storming the Brooklyn Bridge and grinding traffic to a halt on its Manhattan-bound side as cops in riot gear fought to contain the unrest. We'll tell you a little bit more about this when we come back. I'm going to take my last break for this hour. We are moving fast, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking. We are back with Frankly Speaking. Let's go through some viewer comments. Thanks for giving us small person place to air those concerns. Why aren't these people being arrested? Hundreds of anti-Israel protesters wreaking havoc in downtown New York City. I don't know where hate crime against Jews. I don't know what avenue to go down with this. I mean, you've got to assume that Hochul and others are concerned about it because that's a part of their voter base too. Just like we're seeing with Biden and his weakness with Israel. But the marchers brought traffic to a halt on the Manhattan-bound side. The marchers, including some who burned American flags while one yelled, "Death to America," converged on the historic span around 3:45 p.m., immediately disrupting cars and prompting New York Police Department cops to swarm the area and begin cuffing at least 24 of them. 24 of them. This has got to be another bail reform, though. I mean, they're going to be out before the ink's dry, right? But imagine just trying to go home. How does this convince anybody to take up the anti-Israel stance? You're going home after a long day at work, and you're now stuck on the bridge when you just want to get home, or maybe you've got take your kids to practice, whatever the case may be. You can't do that because you are stuck in a protest. A bunch of people already got over a protester on the bridge, told the Post. They started arresting people here. Police in riot gear were prepared and took a zero-tolerance approach to the massive demonstration, blocking the bridge to keep the protesters away from City Hall. Although one arrest had been officially reported by late afternoon, at least 24 people were placed in handcuffs at the scene, with many other marchers making a run for the subways when they spotted cops moving in. Later on Monday evening, smoke could be seen billowing outside one police plaza at around 7:30 p.m. as a group of protesters lit flares and chanted pro-Palestinian slogans. According to NYPD, police first responded to a planned protest on Wall Street around 2:15 by the group Within Our Lifetime before the marchers began moving towards the bridge. At least 4 vehicles appear to be blocking the road along with protesters. Some passengers were seen exiting their vehicles with their luggage and walking past the protest in a bid to catch their flights. Wow, you don't even think about that. All that money you have in the flights. Oh, my goodness. Police and multiple tow trucks arrived on the scene shortly after the protest began to remove the vehicles blocking the expressway. Wow. Yeah, the videos are disturbing. I mean, you've got Death to America chants. It is. I saw the protesters in New York City burned an American flag in the street yesterday. Yes, they did. This is how much pride in and love for our country has changed. My wife's brother got arrested in the 70s for just draping an American flag around his shoulder. Yeah, think of the difference. Now let's really think about it. Are you shocked? Are you surprised that someone was burning a flag? I think we've become used to it with some of these radical protests, unfortunately. I'm not saying that because I want that to be the case, but I would have been shocked if they said no American flags were burned in yesterday's protest. I would have been surprised if they said no one chanted Death to America. All right, that does it. Wow. The first hour is already in the can, so to speak. That's unbelievable. We've got 1 hour left together, so please be a part of it. You see the number on the bottom of your screen. On tomorrow's program, we will get an update from Sheriff Jim Allard, and I'll tell you what he had to say yesterday. We'll also talk or hear from Congressman Langworthy, who I think is doing something very important in sending a letter over to the FCC. We'll talk about that as well. But again, at any time, if you have any questions for Sheriff Allard tomorrow, please feel free to reach me on the number at the bottom of the screen, and I can try to add it to the list because we do have an update on the court case in Steuben County, and I will start the program, if I remember. I will start the program with that when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. Stay with us. We are back. It is now hour number 2 of Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, thank you so much for joining us. I am your host, Frank Aiken. So here's the update from Sheriff Allard. Again, as a reminder, Sheriff Allard will be our guest tomorrow morning, right around 7:10, 7:15. A statement from the Sheriff's Office on denial of the county's request to appeal the judge's ruling in the resolution case. So, it's a little wonky, but I know you've been following this closely. In September of 2023, members of the Steuben County government passed 2 resolutions to strip the sheriff's liability protections under the public officer law and to cause him to purchase, at his own expense, millions of dollars of liability insurance. Upon submitting a petition to enjoin the resolutions to the New York State Supreme Court, the sheriff was granted a stay of the resolutions until it could be heard in Supreme Court. Prior to the initial court hearing, the county appealed the resolution requiring liability insurance. In January, after the initial hearing, the New York State Supreme Court ordered that a legislator who was present in the closed executive sessions leading to the resolution vote needed to be deposed to provide firsthand information to the court for the court's use in deciding whether or not the county acted in bad faith. Oh, I think our guests are here. The county then filed a motion in appellate court to appeal this decision and prevent the testimony of the legislature. On April 11, 2024, the New York State Appellate Court denied the Steuben County's attorney's motion to appeal, allowing for the court-ordered deposition of a county legislature to proceed with a final hearing in New York State Supreme Court subsequent to the legislator's deposition. I know it's wonky. Please forgive me. Although the county's request to appeal only prolonged the legal fight and the use of taxpayer monies to continue it, Steuben County residents are assured that the sheriff and the men and women of the sheriff's office remain committed to their public safety mission, as well as serving the citizens of Steuben County. For more information about the Steuben County Sheriff's Office and its various activities, programs, and duties, follow them on Facebook at Steuben County Sheriff's Office or visit our Steuben County Sheriff's Office app and website, Steuben NY Sheriff. There we go. I know I promised it would be a little wonky, and that's exactly what it was. But we're going to get a more personable update from the sheriff tomorrow. Oh, is my music still playing? Thank you for that. Oh, I apologize. I wonder why that is. You never know what's going to happen with technology. Our guests are here. But yes, we'll give you a full update tomorrow. I'm not going to reread that whole piece from the sheriff because we're going to talk to him tomorrow and get a better idea of what that all means, kind of get around the legalese, if you will. So we'll hear from him tomorrow on the program. I'm sorry, I'm being distracted by our guests getting ready to come in. So the sheriff's office responding. We will hear from him tomorrow on the program. Back to Iran and Israel. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. If you are just joining us, John Kirby saying, well, I know the president said don't, and Iran did anyway, but don't think of it that way. Another way to look at it is they didn't because it was successfully stopped, even though we heard later on that, 7 missiles did get through, something like that. So we're going to talk about that. There is a piece here from Lee Zeldin. A couple things here about Lee Zeldin. Music only overlapped for about 39 seconds when you returned. Yeah, I know what that problem is. Thank you for that update. I think when we come back from break, we should be okay. As always, you can reach out to me. See the number on the bottom of your screen. Okay, here are my guests. I'm going to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Akam, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Market Street in Corning. I'd like to say welcome to our guest. Welcome. How are you enjoying Corning so far?
How do you enjoy Corning so far? Means come ti trovi a Corning, almeno fino ad ora?
Very well, molto bene.
Oh,
thank you.
Yeah. So you're going to be performing tonight at the fundraiser. How long are you in Corning for?
Dice che stasera farai una performance, quindi da quanto tempo sei a Corning? Quando sei arrivato a Corning?
Sono arrivato a Corning ieri e ho potuto visitare il museo del vetro, è stata un'esperienza bellissima.
Okay.
E stasera ho il concerto e domani riparto per l'Italia.
I arrived to Corning yesterday.
Okay.
I had the opportunity to visit the Museum of Glass, which was a very astonishing experience.
Yeah.
Today I will perform at the high school, and tomorrow we leave.
You have a very extensive tour schedule on your website. You play a lot of places.
Dice, hai fatto concerti in diversi posti qui negli Stati Uniti.
Sì, questo di stasera è il quinto concerto di questo piccolo tour. Ho suonato in Princeton, in New York, in Teaneck e stasera la sua.
This is my 5th concert in this small tour that I'm attending here in the States. I play piano in Princeton, New York, Teaneck, and tonight.
How long have you been playing piano?
Da quanto tempo?
Da quando ho 8 anni.
I was 8-year-old.
Oh, really?
So it's a long time.
Now, tonight you're going to be playing Bach. What is it about Bach that you like so much?
Stasera suonerai Bach, quindi che cos'è che ti piace di Bach in particolare?
Allora, io amo la musica di Bach fin da quando ero bambino e da sempre l'ho suonata e studiata con grande passione. Poi da 30 anni la eseguo in concerto e sono spesso invitato a fare masterclass proprio specifiche su Bach. E stasera suono forse l'opera più grande, più importante delle composizioni a tastiera di Bach, che sono le variazioni Goldberg.
I have been, I like to play Bach since the beginning of my career, since I was a child. Now I have been playing Bach for 30 years now, and tonight I will play probably the most important masterpiece of Bach, that is the Variazioni Goldberg.
How long is a typical show? How long will this be tonight?
Quanto dura la performance?
L'esecuzione di variazioni Goldberg, la mia interpretazione, dura 80 minuti, fra gli 80 e 83 minuti, ma questa sera sarà un po' ridotta perché lascerò spazio, prima della mia esecuzione ci saranno 2 giovani pianisti della high school e quindi io abbreverò leggermente.
normally the performance is about 80 minutes.
Okay.
83, exactly, 83 minutes. But tonight it will be shorter because I wanted to cut a little bit my performance in order to leave the floor to two young pianists from the High School of Corning.
Oh,
that
okay.
will join the performance.
So you're playing with two Corning kids, is that right?
La performance viene fatta insieme a
Sì,
due.
sì. Prima suoneranno i due giovani pianisti dell'high school e poi suonerò io.
At the beginning, we will have the two young pianists play.
Mhm.
Then I will play.
Ah. So just before we go, what would you say to someone who's maybe never seen a classical performance before?
Dice che cosa prima sul finire, cosa pensi di poter dire a chi non ha mai visto una performance come quella che stai per fare stasera?
Penso che bisogna avere il desiderio di mettersi in ascolto, perché la musica di Bach e tutta la musica è straordinariamente bella e può arrivare a chiunque. Quindi basta avere un atteggiamento di ascolto, volontà di ricevere qualcosa.
Yeah, you have to put yourself in a position to listen to the music, to find inside yourself the attitude to listen, because music is so nice that if you succeed in putting yourself in a position to listen, you can find something inside that is very nice, and we hope that we will do it tonight.
Yes. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, and best of luck tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Grazie.
thank you, thank you.
So
Thank
I'm
you
going to
for
put
us.
I'm going to put this up on the screen now as we go to break. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking. Well, that was a first on Frankly Speaking with a translator. Welcome back to said Frankly Speaking as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio again. Just for a quick moment, there is our pasta dinner and piano concert tonight. It sounds fun. I'm glad that they have high school students involved as well. I did not realize that part of it, even though now I see on the bottom of the page it says exactly that. Dinner from 4:30 till 6:30. Eat in or take out, $15. Dinner and the concert, just $20. What a nice treat there this morning. I'm glad that they could be on the program. It sounds like their trip is going well. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit more about Israel and Iran. Please feel free to weigh in at any time. And I would also just, if I could take just 1 second, and I'm so glad that we could have our guests on. I know I had the translator cut off on the camera angle. That was a tough interview going live with that many guests and that you couldn't see, but about 5 guests. But if you have any organization that you're a part of, a charitable organization that you have, you need for fundraisers, please always send them along to me, either at the number on the bottom of the screen, or you can email me at frank@wydctv.com at any time. And I'll try to do my best to promote these events. Now, the San Giobanni Valdarno Sister City Committee is near and dear to my heart. I've had them on this program in the past, but as well as way past during my radio career. So I really enjoy having them on. I think it's exciting to see the excitement from them. Okay, quickly, I wanted to mention this, and I'm not going to read the whole piece, but I put it up, let me see, on our website. If you have not been to our website, it's wydc-tv.com, excuse me. And I put the new article up by Assemblyman Phil Palmisano, highlighting the importance of organ donation and Donate Life Month. You know, if you've watched this show for any amount of time, this is an issue very near and dear to the Assemblyman's heart. So he brings it up on a pretty regular basis. And that's why I'm glad that he reminded us that this is Donate Life Month. So you can find that whole piece for yourself at our website. And you're going to start seeing, if you go to our website, wydc-tv.com, if you start going to our website, you'll see that I'm going to be participating a lot in the substance there with the articles and clips from this morning's interviews, those type of things. So let's get back to, hey, speaking of radio, I mentioned I had a radio career at one point. Let's tie in with what our congressman is doing Where's the piece here? It was at the Daily Caller. Someone brought it to my attention. I really appreciate that. That Congressman Nick Langworthy sent a letter Monday to the Federal Communications Commission calling on them to investigate liberal billionaire George Soros' purchase of Audacity Incorporated, the nation's second largest radio company that holds hundreds of local radio stations. Now, many of you may have heard this news, this breaking story, when it first happened, that Soros did buy the second largest radio company. Now, what does that mean? Of course, you can read the writing on the wall. Now, it wasn't Soros who bought the company that I was a part of, but it was very much a political decision not to have me on anymore. That's what will happen here. They see talk radio on its kind of last leg, especially after the passing of Rush Limbaugh. No real successor there. Now, there's a lot of very successful people. I'm not saying that, but they're seeing an opportunity to perhaps silence that outlet where so many people depend on for their news and information. The Daily Caller obtained the copy of the letter in which Langworthy says it is FCC's role to regulate radio communications and make sure this does not further Soros's effort to control the media and flood local radio with far-left ideology. He calls for the FCC to ensure the protection of consumers and reaffirm the critical role of local radio. Now, the outlet originally reported that Audacity is the second largest radio company in the U.S. that has over 230 stations, and Soros is now involved in that. George Soros's purchase of Audacity is another step in the effort to choke American radio with his own agenda. It threatens not just the diversity of viewpoint on the airwaves, but it also has the potential to stifle local news and community-based reporting. The FCC needs to take a serious look so we can safeguard our local stations and preserve our freedom of expression. I'm glad he is calling them out. He did send this letter. I'm not going to, well, I'll give you a little bit of what the letter had to say. I ask that the Commission ensure its due diligence and thoughtful scrutiny over the transfer of ownership of Audacity, Inc. and its portfolio of local radio stations to an investor with a long, well-known track record of pushing a far-left partisan agenda. Americans still, and I'm just quickly reading through this. I'm not going to go through the whole letter. But Americans still rely on local radio as one of the last media outlets available for local news, as well as diverse opinions across the political spectrum. I believe that this sale is the latest in a series of moves by a partisan, progressive billionaire to consolidate control over the media and flood hundreds of local radio stations with far-left ideology and propaganda. Furthermore, I believe that what we could lose in this process is the unique lifeline that local radio brings through both local connections and diversity of thought that has been so important to Americans, particularly in recent years. This sale of debt and transfer of ownership to a fund owned by George Soros suggests a serious effort to silence opposing voices on the airwaves, jeopardizing the future of community-based radio in the process. This matter gives the FCC reason to act with the due diligence with which it has been tasked. I strongly urge the FCC to examine this transfer of ownership with full scrutiny. Thank you for your attention to this matter, and I look forward to your response. Hopefully there will be a response. I'd be curious to see what is said about this, because it is a troubling sign, especially for so many of you that listen to talk radio and for years got so much information, both local, national, and regional, but also a different point of view from what you'll see with the legacy media. Why don't rich conservative people buy media? That's a good question. I don't have an answer for that, but thank you, viewer. It is interesting that I think a lot of times we don't take things like this seriously enough. As conservatives, we think that, well, George Soros isn't going to buy up the second largest radio conglomerate, and then he does. I think naively, because I will admit this happened to me. I naively thought that my show would be on indefinitely, forever, on radio. And then when political decisions were made to get rid of conservative talk radio, you're kind of left in the lurch. And there's going to be a lot of people, I think, because of this purchase, that are going to have to deal with that. And I don't think we as conservatives are ever quite ready when things that we look for information, when they're taken away. Very often, I think we're a little behind the eight ball on many of these things. Same with technology, voter technology, for instance, but technology in general. When we don't use the system the way the Democrats do when it comes to voting, we're just always a little behind. It takes us a little time to catch up. Anyway, let's go back to Iran. Andrea Stricker wrote, I think, a really interesting piece, kind of tying in what we've been talking about. President Biden has spent his 3 years in office making it clear to Tehran's terrorist regime that America won't make it pay a price for attacking our allies, bankrolling Hamas, and expanding Iranian nuclear capabilities. In fact, by refusing to enforce sanctions already on the books, Biden is helping Iran foot the bill for its aggression, including the first direct attack on Israel in the regime's 45 years in power. Each year since Biden took office, Iran has steadily increased oil exports, its most lucrative revenue source, following a historic collapse of sales during the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign. The increase is no accident. U.S. officials privately acknowledge they've gradually relaxed some enforcement of sanctions on Iranian oil sales. This month, Iran boosted oil production to an estimated 5-year high of 3.4 million barrels per day, primarily from China, which buys the commodity at a discount. From oil alone, the regime has earned upwards of $100 billion and a handy cushion from the consequences of its own actions. Another source of Tehran's revenue is liquefied petroleum gas, which the regime has started to export in record quantities, rendering the top seller in the region. In public, the administration denies it's going easy on Iran. According to the sanctions it should be enforcing that are still on the books, specifically regulations requiring the administration to sanction individuals and foreign financial institutions that trade in Tehran origin commodities. I know I'm going through a lot of wonky things this morning, but it's important to, as they're trying to spin yet again this idea that Iran, well, they didn't, think of it this way, John Kirby says, they didn't really ignore Biden when he said don't. They kind of didn't. It should be clear after the weekend's dramatic attack, thankfully foiled by U.S., Israeli, and partners' military ingenuity, the consequences of contained U.S. appeasement of Iran are a matter of life and death. Washington must rectify its failed Iran policy and curb Tehran's funding sources before the regional conflict spins out of control. I hate to say it, but it was someone within the Obama administration that said it, that Joe Biden has been wrong on every foreign policy decision he's made. And that's why he's calling on Israel, blaming the victim, again, as he does so often, saying, don't escalate this. We don't want more. Just take the win, Israel, and ignore it. As Hugh Hewitt said, does that ever work with a bully? Just ignore the bully and he end up being your friend? It's a failed policy. And I've got to say, I know a lot of anti-Israel protests out there. I know a lot of people on the left not happy with Israel. It's sad to see how this strain of anti-Semitism. But one of the things they're calling for, and Chuck Schumer specifically was calling for Netanyahu to be replaced. I've got to say, I don't want to speak for people in Israel, but you've got to be happy that Netanyahu is the leader here at this point. That it isn't foreign policy decisions that aren't being made as in the key of Biden, that they're more being made from the decision of Israel's got to protect itself. So I think that was just kind of a quick overview that I wanted to mention to you. Now let's go to another hot topic. How am I doing on time? Oh, I'm doing good. Okay. We're moving right along. That was such a fun guest that we had on that I haven't got over it yet. So Lee Zeldin, I mentioned this earlier in the program, but I did not bring up the article specifically. He did a piece at the New York Post. Lee Zeldin was very instrumental, and it really was the deciding factor of why Republicans took the House. He ran on public safety, and that's why now you see Governor Hochul so often trying to suggest she's tough on crime, even though we know she isn't. He says Americans from all walks of life agree upon one hard truth. New York City isn't what it used to be. It's become the epitome of failed far-left policies pushing residents to flee every day. In Times Square, 2 NYPD officers were beaten by a group of criminal aliens who were released from jail with no bail. Our subways have turned into underground crime system, where innocent people commuting to work fear getting randomly pushed into oncoming trains. And let's not forget the countless women who are sucker punched lately in broad daylight. Too many children remain trapped in the cycle of multi-generational poverty, stuck in poorly performing public schools. Businesses are shuttering. Homeowners are unable to defend their property from squatters, and the cost of living continues to rise while quality of life deteriorates by the day. And I would make the argument that this isn't just the city. I know he's writing for the Post, and that's why he mentions the city, and he mentions the subways, but we have a quality of life issue. We obviously have a public safety issue. We see it in the news daily. And that's why, and I don't know, maybe, well, let me ask you this question. Does this sound like someone who's maybe thinking about running again? Just out of curiosity. The Big Apple is becoming rotten, poisoned by far-left elected officials pushing a radical pro-criminal, anti-business, anti-taxpayer agenda. And that's evident. Look at Hasty saying that deterrence, punishments is not a deterrent to crime. We see the constant coddling of criminals and supporting criminals and the constant attacks on our police. But continuing. Instead of leading with courage to defend New Yorkers by enacting the necessary changes to make life safer, freer, and more affordable, our elected officials have set their sights elsewhere, trying to imprison and bankrupt President Biden's chief political opponent, Donald Trump. What a great point. Manhattan's District Attorney Alvin Bragg, not worried about crime on the street, worried about a show trial. For the next 6 weeks, all eyes will be on 100 Center Street, where Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg has launched his show trial in the world's media capital. He's eagerly doing his party's bidding by prosecuting Trump using an obscure legal tactic to yield a campaign talking point. Never before has a charge like this been brought without evidence of an underlying crime. Bragg refuses even to identify one. And this is just a larger picture. Someone else said it, and I can't remember who it was. Oh, it might have been, weird enough, Piers Morgan, that we'll get to later on, saying this is the kind of thing that could ensure Trump the White House. So to all his enemies out there, all the people that don't like Trump, be careful what you're doing, was his argument. But the unprecedented abuse of power and prosecutorial overreach is nothing less than a threat to democracy. Bragg single-handedly turned countless law-abiding New Yorkers into crime victims with his blatant refusal to enforce the law. The judge in this case, well, let me take a step back. He campaigned, meaning Bragg, on taking down Donald Trump with no idea where the charge could even come from. The judge in the case, Juan Merchan, is a left-wing Biden-Harris 2020 campaign donor. Merchan refuses to recuse himself despite overwhelming evidence of bias against the former president. Couple that with the fact his daughter is a prominent Democrat operative actively using his case to fundraise for Adam Schiff. Her past clients include Biden, Harris, and Chuck Schumer. After Trump called this out, Merchant issued an oppressive gag order, stripping the former president of his First Amendment right to defend himself against false charges. On top of all of that, the trial is being held in one of America's most liberal bastions. Good luck finding an impartial jury of peers in Manhattan. Yes, what did they throw away yesterday? 50 jurors who said they could not be fair. And think of the people that will say they're going to be fair, but hate Trump and see this as an opportunity to be the one that brings down Trump. That's what Bragg's doing. That's what Merchant is doing. Trump is facing a coordinated effort by a plethora of partisans across the country to bankrupt, imprison, and destroy him. Officials in some states have sought to block him from the ballot altogether in their biggest threat to democracy, trying to deny Americans the right to choose for themselves who to elect their next president. On the top issues of the day, Democrats are telling voters not to believe their own eyes. Quote, right, that's what it's like maybe Lee Zeldin is watching this show. Rising crime is just a perception. The economy has never been stronger, and the border is secure. They say when, in reality, we know none of it is true. But never mind what you're seeing or feeling, experiencing. Crime is fine. Your grocery bill isn't as bad as you thought it was. Instead of changing its policies, the Democratic machine has resorted to lawfare because it knows it can't win on the issues. On the flip side, Trump is not only standing up to these political prosecutions, he is relentlessly campaigning across the country, hearing directly from fellow Americans about the things that matter most to them. The moment presents a major opportunity to earn support from longtime Democrat voters ready to abandon blind partisan loyalties. This year calls for a historic coalition of Americans from all walks of life who understand the current trajectory of our nation is unsustainable. The left can and will hurl every last desperate attack it can conjure up against Donald Trump. But the American public can and must see right through it and save our country. That's Lee Zeldin, former gubernatorial candidate, represented Suffolk County in the House of Representatives as well. Boy, it makes you wonder. Makes you wonder a little bit. Is he thinking about public service in the future? Well, someone asked him. And I'll tell you about that when we come back. So stay with us. This is, Frankly Speaking, here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We will be right back. a beautiful morning here on Marcus Street in Corning as we broadcast live from the Hesselson studio. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. So Lee Zeldin had that great op-ed. You can find that for yourself at the New York Post if you're interested, if you want to pass it along. I thought it was a great op-ed. Makes you wonder what he's got in line in the future. Well, the New York Republican gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin said he would consider serving in the Trump White House if the former president wins back the Oval Office. Zeldin, a former Long Island congressman, said that he'll be answering the call for public service in the future. I'm not thinking about myself, but if the president of the United States asks you to consider serving in a particular capacity, that's something to be taken seriously and not dismissed without significant thought. His name was thrown around for a little while. I haven't heard it recently about a potential running mate for Trump. Obviously, he's got a great background. He hits on the right topics. I don't know. I know a lot of people have speculated about picking someone from New York, maybe not being the greatest decision, but I don't know. I like Lee Stefanik. I like Lee Zeldin. I mean, I know he's never going to win New York, but think about this is a really important vice presidential pick for Trump. He's got to make the right move on this because it could really bring a lot of people that may not like Trump but could hold their nose to vote for him if there's somebody else on the ticket. But I'll continue. The former representative emphasized he's focusing solely on helping Trump and other Republicans on the ballot win in the November 5th election, not his own prospects. Zeldin, who is stumping across the country as a Trump campaign surrogate while the ex-president faces criminal trial in Manhattan, will address the Michigan Republican Party Monday night in the battleground suburb of Oakland County. So this is another sad fact when we talk about all these cases against Trump, that he's going to need surrogates like this to go out and do the campaigning. And great surrogate, by the way. Lee Zeldin is doing a great job. He insisted Trump can snatch the blue-leaning Wolverine state from President Biden in the general election by making inroads among Jewish, Black, Latino, and Asian voters. Middle-of-the-road Michigan voters are enraged that a growing segment of the Democrat Party supports Hamas over Israel, he said. We have to engage these voters. They are concerned about inflation, crime, and illegal immigration. He suggested that during breaks in his trial in New York, Trump should do meet and greets with Latino voters, appearing on black radio stations and visiting various locations. Got cut off there. But there you go. A little bit of speculation about Lee Zeldin and what the future may hold for Zeldin. Now, did you see, and we're going to talk about the hush money trial. Not too much, though, because I know everybody's covering it, but we're going to give you a different perspective on things. Before that, you remember back in 2016, the Hillary Clinton deplorables comment. And there's been so many examples like that since. This is another example that we were talking about the media earlier. Oh, I've got some messages I have to read too. But we were talking about the media earlier and Nick Langworthy writing a letter to the FCC because George Soros bought Audacity, which is the second biggest radio conglomerate, to silence conservative voices. Here's some comments from viewers. You would about a bunch of different issues. But first, I have thoughts on why wealthy conservatives don't buy media outlets. When far-left liberals buy radio stations, the Dems and legacy media will do all they can to send advertisers their way, as long as the agenda is left-leaning. If conservatives bought a radio station, even if they try to be balanced, the same people will do all they can to demonize any advertiser that might be brave enough to support that station. That is a major issue. I would agree with that very often. If you look, I just can go on the past when I worked in radio. You know, you'd have announcements. Certain advertisers would not want to play during Rush's show or whoever it was. Yes, because a lot of people don't want to deal with the headache. They're just trying to advertise their business. Where on the other side of the coin, I would agree with you, Ken, there's more support there. If it's a Democrat group with big money, is going to support it. I think that's a good point. Next, you would think they would ask for a change of venue just because he has so much property development in New York City and the fact that it's New York City, that they're not obviously not going to be friendly to Trump. That's why, again, I mentioned it earlier, 50 people thrown out of the jury pool yesterday. Continuing, Trump haters are giddy about him possibly going to prison. Can you imagine the must-see TV when Trump wins and pardons himself in January? The sea level will rise from liberal tears. Thank you, viewers. Keep those comments coming in. So Katie Couric, just to tie this in with the media that we were talking about, you see the bias in the legacy media. You see moves like that with George Soros and others. Katie Couric is now facing backlash. Listen to what she had to say. She was on, I don't know what, it was Bill Maher's podcast. She said the socioeconomic disparities are a lot, and class resentment is a lot, and anti-intellectualism and elitism is what is driving many of these anti-establishment people, which are Trump voters. So I think that is a huge problem that we have to address. Yes, if you are a Trump supporter, it's anti-intellectualism, that you are out of touch, you don't like elitism. I mean, globalization and the transition from an industrial to technological society, I don't know if you've ever been jealous of someone else or resentful. It is such a corroding and bitter, almost bile feeling. Well, critics instantly called her out. Imagine that. Talk about an elitist attitude. Talk about exactly what she's discussing. Katie Couric. Talk about an out-of-touch, elite media representative. This is what you call projection, one Twitter user said, blaming the other side for feeling a certain way when it's actually you who feel that way. That's a good point. It's full of people she's never met and wouldn't lower herself to be around. Yeah, she would never. I mean, that's the biggest problem in the first place with the media. They're in their bubble, their Washington bubble. They don't know Trump supporters. They don't know MAGA people. And by the way, they use MAGA as an insulting term, just so you know. They don't know these people, and they would never lower themselves to be around someone that's generally concerned about public safety, their finances, generally concerned about important day-to-day issues. And that, to Katie Couric, is anti-intellectualism. But she can, have her cocktail parties and hang out with Hollywood celebrities. But she's got to tell you how you feel, where your support for Trump would come from. I've never been a jealous person, and I find many of Trump supporters highly educated in vast arenas. I think Couric is a snob and with a low IQ. She's lived inside her glass bubble so long she's completely out of touch with reality. Now, Bill Maher, not a Bill Maher fan. I'm not saying anything. I'm just telling you what he had to say when Katie Couric said that. Not to defend Trump, but to defend the people who still vote for him. Because what they see on the other side to them is even more dangerous, because it's closer to home. My kid is coming home from school and he thinks he's a racist. He's 5. What have you been telling him? My son thinks maybe he's not a boy, and maybe that's true. That happens. Those kind of things are what they say. That's why I'm voting for Trump, Bill Maher said. The elitism, how out of touch they are, it is, yes, it's very, very frustrating. And I just realized I am running late. What do you think about Katie Couric's elitist attitude? Feel free to weigh in. But right now, we've got to take a short break. Stay with us. We are back, broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Thanks so much for joining us. 4 big moments from the first day of Trump's hush money trial. According to the New York Post, no jurors were selected on day 1. And here's a couple of the highlights. It emerged that Trump may have to skip his son Barron's high school graduation ceremony next month because of the trial. His lawyers asked the judge not to hold the trial on Friday, May 17th, so the ex-president can attend the graduation in Florida. The judge did not immediately rule. Melania Trump, Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and former top Trump aides Hope Hicks and Kellyanne Conway are among the names jurors will hear during the trial. The judge said, are among the names jurors, meaning the people they'll hear from? Prosecutor Joshua Steinglass recited Trump's infamous Access Hollywood hot mic moment. The judge ruled that the tape could not be played for jurors, but testimony about the tape will be allowed in. Okay. And the DA's office urged Merchant, the judge, to fine Trump $3,000 for violating the court's gag order by disparaging likely witness Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels in social media posts. Merchant set a hearing on the matter for next week. So tedious. Now, Trump is not happy, obviously, about perhaps missing Barron's graduation. I was looking forward to that graduation with his mother and father there, and it looks like the judge does not allow me to escape the scam. The judge had said it really depends on where we're at on the time and where we are in the trial. Now, how am I doing on time? Sorry. As I mentioned, the jury selection is underway. At least 50 people were dismissed thus far after saying they could not be impartial in judging Trump. Others were excused who said they could not serve for other reasons. I think it's interesting Because let's say you really hate Trump. You're one of the people that want to keep Trump off the ballot. You're one of the people that want to throw any lawsuit at him that you can. And then you get that jury notice. And you say, well, I can say I'm impartial, but I don't need to be. I think that's the real likelihood in New York City, don't you? I just couldn't do it, one prospective juror was heard to say outside the courtroom. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, a Democrat, has charged Trump with falsifying records to cover up a $130,000 payment in the waning days of the 2016 presidential campaign to buy the silence of Stormy Daniels. You know about the rest of the kind of, we don't have to go through all the who, what, when, where, and why. A lot of interesting people that could be interviewed. We'll talk about that as well. Let's see. MSNBC's Joy Reid said Donald Trump is at the point outdoing actual mobsters in his attacks on the judge's family, the daughter. And he's doing it to the point that Lawrence made. He knows he will never spend a day, a second, a moment in prison. But for me, there is something wonderfully poetic about the fact that despite the fact that even if convicted, he's going to go to prison, the first person to actually criminally prosecute Donald Trump is a black Harvard grad. The very kind of person that his former staff, the people who work for him, Stephen Miller, etc., want to never be at Harvard Law School, but he was. That's so despicable to make that false claim. And he came out and graduated, and he's prosecuting you, Donald. And a black woman is doing the same exact thing in Georgia, and the black woman forced you to pay a $175 million fine. That is now also in question because of people who put it up. That might not be legit. Donald Trump is being held, this is Joy Reid again from MSNBC, Donald Trump is being held to account by the very multicultural, multiracial democracy that he's trying to dismantle. And for me, that's something poetic and actually wonderful about that. It says something good about our country, that we're still capable of having that happen. Go DEI. My DEIs are bringing it home. We got to take a break. Stay with us. Final break. We'll wrap things up here on Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox wrapping up this morning's edition. Hard to believe. Piers Morgan, I'm not a big Piers Morgan fan either, but he has a good point. Donald Trump should go to his son's graduation. Go to the graduation. Honestly, if you're watching President Trump, just go to the graduation. Every parent in America, whether they like you or hate you, will go, yeah, I'd have done that too. Now, we know it's interesting because Morgan is, you never know what you're going to get with him. Okay, we'll just put it that way. He said he called the case one of the most petty, self-harming acts of political suicide I've ever witnessed. Have you lost your minds, America? What a demeaning way to treat a former president. Secondly, if you're on the left, why would you think this would possibly work? Why would you not think that what you're doing here is going to almost guarantee Donald Trump wins the next election? For his part, Trump said Merchant's decision that he cannot attend Barron's graduation or Supreme Court arguments for other case he's involved in are collectively a perfect ploy to help the radical left Democrats. That's exactly what they want. This is about election interference. That's all. But I thought that was a good point from Piers Morgan. Jonathan Turley was on Fox News Channel's America's Newsroom. And Dana Perino asked Jonathan Turley. Turley does great work. If you've ever seen some of his articles on New York Post. Jonathan, you wrote about Cicero saying the more laws, then less justice. The more laws, the less justice. And that you've seen the same here. How so? Well, Turley said, well, the more cases against Trump, the less justice we receive as a people. You know, the opponents of Trump would have been far better off with just one case, the Mar-a-Lago case. That's based on real law, real precedent. And one can disagree with the interpretations, but it's not a reach in the sense of this case. This case is creating something. It's creating a criminal code just for Trump. You know, you have a misdemeanor whose time has expired. The statute of limitations ran out, and it was revived in this rather curious way. He's effectively arguing that Trump was filing false business records through his counsel to hide a federal crime. But it isn't a federal crime. This wasn't a campaign contribution. None of that appears to matter. And that's why a lot of us are looking at this and recoiling. This is not how the law is supposed to be. I know many people have called it a banana republic at this point, going after the former president. New Yorkers appear to like it this way. They elected James, who ran on bagging Trump for anything. Didn't even mention what. And they now are lionizing this district attorney who's putting together what many of us consider to be an absurd indictment. I know Trump derangement syndrome is a term that people have used, but that's because there's so much hate for Trump, it doesn't matter about the rule of law at this point. I don't see this ending well, but we are out of time. Yes, over 50 prospective Trump jurors say they're unable to be fair, and they were therefore excused. I just couldn't do it, one prospective juror said. A randomly selected group of 18 prospective jurors were taken through pre-recording screening questions covering education, news habits, hobbies, and their ability to be neutral. Okay. Jurors must answer a questionnaire, including checks on whether they have been members of far-right groups associated with Trump. What about far left? I'm confused. More than a dozen court officers were stationed around the courtroom in Manhattan as the process ground on, and Trump craned his neck to see the prospective panelists. Selection of 12 jurors, given anonymity to protect them from what the judge says is risk of bribery or even physical harm, is expected to be a torturous process. It could go on as long as 2 weeks, according to one of Trump's lawyers. We are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. Thank you to our guests. That was a lot of fun talking about tonight's fundraiser. There is the information. Do not miss it. Eat in or take out, just $15 tonight. Dinner and the concert, $20. It's at Corning High School. It's the Corning San Giobanni Valdarno Pasta Dinner and Piano Concert, Sister City Committee. It's 7 o'clock if you are going to the concert. Just keep that in mind. And we heard from renowned concert pianist Andrea Turini. He was nice. It was fun. I've never done an interview where I needed a translator before, so that was fun, something different. Here's a comment from a viewer. Don't they see they are destroying the Democratic Party from their obsession with Trump? Well, I think there's a lot of factions there that are playing. You have the hatred of Trump. You have this new strain of anti-Semitism, anti-Israel sentiment. And it's not even a strain. It's a large group. It's definitely an interesting time. I know it's been almost cliche where people say, well, it's not your grandparents' Democratic Party, but if your parents were Democrat, it definitely, if your grandparents were Democrat, it definitely isn't the same. So again, thank you to our guests. I hope that everybody can make it out to the fundraiser tonight to help the Sister City Committee. Get to hear those great stories. I'm going to try to make it over there. Hopefully it's a little late for me, but I do appreciate them being on the show last week and this week. That was a lot of fun, so I do appreciate that. Tomorrow on the program, we'll be talking with Sheriff Jim Allard about that piece that I read this morning from the sheriff's office, on the statement from the sheriff's office on the denial of the county's request to appeal the judge's ruling in resolution case. It was a little wonky. I understand that. That's why we're excited to talk tomorrow with Sheriff Jim Allard to get the real scoop. So make sure you tune in. And if you have any questions for him, please feel free to contact me at any time. You see that number on the bottom of your screen, and we'll try our best to get those questions asked during the program. That does it for me. Have a great day, everyone, and we will be back tomorrow morning starting at 6 a.m. for Frankly Speaking, only on WYDC TV. Big Fox, I look forward to it already.